Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I am Peter Bailey. I'm Cheryl's husband, Doris's son-in-law. I first met Doris in December of 1973 in Etobicoke at the house at 14 Lorraine. I had met Cheryl at the University of Guelph earlier in the semester, and she had invited me to come to visit. Not sure what Doris thought at first, as I had long, almost shoulder-length hair. I know, you can't picture it. A full beard, and drove a beat-up old car. But if she had her misgivings, she never let on. She welcomed me. And right away, I knew this was someone I could get along with. And we did, for the following 51 and a half years. Doris was born April 14th, 1926, to Arthur and Jessie Bond in Berlin, Ontario. As you know, Berlin later became known as Kitchener. She was the youngest of 9 children. She had 6 sisters, the Bond girls, and 2 brothers. One of the brothers was Tom, and the other was Jim. Yep, that's right, James Bond. Apparently, Tom and Jim easily enjoyed looking after their little sister. Since she was petite, they found she could easily fit inside an old car tire, which they would then roll down the street with Doris inside. What fun. Doris's grandfather, Wilson Eiler, a Baptist, had heard a traveling preacher talk about the Swedenborgian, or New Church, in 1888. He was so taken by the teachings that he moved his family to Kitchener from the north shore of Lake Erie to be closer to the Carmel New Church Society. Doris's father, Arthur Bond, had been a gardener at the castle in Abingdon, England. He moved to Kitchener in 1905 to work in the greenhouses of Wilson Eiler. It was here that Arthur met Jessie, the boss's daughter, and they soon married. The Bonds and Eilers regularly attended service at the Carmel Church, and Doris attended the Carmel Church School from grades 1 to 8, continuing a lifelong connection to the church. Doris loved to play in the greenhouses, particularly with the cats and kittens that lived there, as they were not allowed in the house. This may have started her long affection for animals, as she always had a special way with dogs and animals throughout her life. One other thing found in the greenhouse was tomatoes. She told us when times were hard during the Depression, the family often only had tomato soup to live on. Surprisingly, it remained her favorite soup throughout her life. As was said before, unfortunately, when Doris was only 14, her father Arthur died, leaving the older siblings to support the family. Doris was in high school at this time, attending the Kitchener-Waterloo Collegiate Institute, where she was the class rep on the athletic board and played softball. And she became known around the community as a really good softball player, particularly as a pitcher. As Todd mentioned, during the war, her contribution was working at the Sunshine Factory during the summer. She worked in the smoke bomb department, working on a machine that punched holes in the middle of a circle of metal. She told us that, unfortunately, while trying to unjam her machine one time with her supervisor's wrench, she also managed to punch a hole right through the middle of his wrench. I guess he wasn't happy. After grade 12, she and friends from the church went to Winona as farmerettes at the E.D. Smith Fruit Factory, putting labels on Tiger ketchup. They also picked cherries, pruned apple trees, and tied up grapevines. The girls slept in bunkhouses and were paid, but according to Doris, not very much. At this point, her mother made arrangements for Doris to go to the New Church College in Bernathen, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, for her first year of college. She was there in 1944-45 when the war ended. In those days, to offset tuition fees, students were given jobs on campus. Doris had to work as a maid for the Pitcairn family, helping with Sunday dinner. And during the week, she worked at the museum dusting and mending books. Upon returning to Kitchener, she went to work at the Dominion Life Insurance Company and joined the company bowling league, something that foreshadowed something to come later. She dated several boys, but dropped everyone when Jack Hamm arrived in March of 1947. Jack had returned from the war in 1945 having achieved the rank of Company Sergeant Major, and had been awarded the Military Medal for bravery. She agreed to go with Jack on the recommendation of Jack's brother Harold, and Harold was in the church group, and they had bowled together, so she thought, well, maybe she could trust his recommendation. Jack took her to St. Patrick's Day dance in Kitchener, where they had a lot of fun, danced well together, she said. They dated for 2 months until May 28th, when Jack proposed. Doris apparently said, well, I'll think about it. The next morning, Doris told her mother about their proposal. Jessie, her mother, thought he was too old for Doris. Jack was 32 and Doris only 21, but added, if you can't live without the man, then marry him. So they did. 2.5 months later, and not long after, moved to Red Lake, which is way north of Lake Superior, where Jack got work helping to build the mine there. They had a one-room cabin. And as a newlywed, there wasn't a lot for Doris to do, and she suffered from cabin fever. You can only imagine what it was like for Doris, having lived in a busy house full of her siblings, to suddenly be on her own for much of the day in the middle of nowhere. But she had a dog named Rags to keep her company. And the story goes that the dog went everywhere with her, even to the movies, to see Gone with the Wind, which runs for about 4 hours. And the dog stayed with her the entire time. They eventually moved to Toronto and found a house in Downsview on Tom Paine Street, right across from the public school. Michael, Cheryl, and Alex soon came along, and Doris was busy looking after a growing family, and often single-handedly as Jack was away working on construction projects. She took skating lessons with Alex, and as Cheryl said, she often hummed the Skater's Waltz as they whisked around the backyard rink. Whenever the kids were out playing somewhere in the neighborhood, they knew they heard a loud, piercing whistle that it was Doris calling them home. This is an amazing thing. She could do it without using her fingers. You see people who could whistle like this with their fingers in their mouth. She could do it without the fingers. A secret technique that Cheryl tells me she was desperate to learn. But Doris said, no, it's not ladylike. I had occasion to see and hear her do it. And to be honest, I was just amazed to hear this huge sound coming out of such a small person. Doris is descended from the Eilers, a United Empire Loyalist family who were always very patriotic. When Canada chose a new flag, Doris and Jack each flew their own flag in front of the house. Doris loved the red and white maple leaf. She loves the color red, which is one reason we all have red today. Red is for love, after all. It's also the colors of the new church. Jack preferred the old ensign, and it was the flag he fought under during the war. So, the two flags flew in front of the house on the either side of the house, showing that Doris could be stubborn in her own quiet way. She wasn't going to quite give up to just having the ensign in front of the house. As we've heard, Doris was skilled at many things. She could sew, making clothes from patterns. She baked fabulous bread and cakes and cookies, and knew how to decorate them, including some fancy icing. But gardening was her main passion. She would grow all the plants for her garden from seeds that she planted in the basement during the winter months, carefully watering and nurturing them until they were ready to go outside. Her excitement was visible when the seeds sprouted. Gardening was a lifelong devotion, and she especially loved to go to the public greenhouses or commercial greenhouses with Cheryl just to look at flowers. She was also a good pool player. Once the kids left home, Jack and Doris bought a pool table for the basement, where Doris honed her skill. Later at Del Manor, where a retirement home, she would often play with her grandson Travis. This usually drew a crowd of onlookers who wanted to watch a little old granny take on her much younger but much bigger grandson. It was a sight to see. Doris and Jack took several road trips out to Alberta to see Michael and Alex and the grandkids in Edmonton. A particularly memorable trip for me was in 1980 when we traveled to Edmonton for Mike and Les's wedding. Cheryl and I wanted Doris to see the Rockies. So we went to Lake Louise made the climb up to the tea house. For those of you who know, it's about a 7-kilometer hike with about a 1,300-foot elevation. To prepare herself for this, Doris put herself in training by walking up Centennial Hill regularly. We made it all the way to the top, where she was thrilled to see the spectacular views. And I think for the success of that, we decided we'd next travel up the Icefields Parkway and stop to hike at the Angel Glacier. There was hardly anybody there the day we visited, and I saw a path that would take us right out onto the glacier. So I said, let's go. Doris was hesitant, but she said, okay, and off we went. Pretty soon, she was convinced we were lost. And I think stories of people falling down crevasses was kind of in the back of her mind and never being heard from again. And I think that was kind of worrying her. So she kept giving me her grumbly, growly sort of voice that she would give me her warning tone. She'd go, Peter. But I kept reassuring her that we were only just like temporarily out of position and, we would find our way along. And soon we were. She wanted to turn back, but to her credit, she stuck with it. And eventually we arrived back at the car. However, she never let me forget getting lost. Her words, not mine, on the glacier. I think she secretly really enjoyed the venture. Jack passed away in 1998, not long after their 50th anniversary. She sold the house in Etobicoke and moved to an apartment in Oakville with a lake view. She joined a 5-pin bowling league and played until she was 89, sometimes winning as she was able to get right down to the alley with a nice full delivery, sort of like pitching from her old softball days. Taking long walks daily was one of her favorite things, which I think helped her maintain her strength and mobility for many years. Throughout her long life, Doris was such a caring and gentle soul. She always wanted to help. When the grandkids were born, 9 of them in total, she was right there helping. She wanted to get them off to a good start, teaching us all how to get babies start to feed, how to change and hold them, and how to settle them when they were fussy. Never in a bossy or demanding way. That was just not her style. She wanted to be of use. We have saved a family circle cartoon, some of you may remember that Doris had on her fridge. In the first frame, the grandma sits in a grayish, dull room, looking a bit sad. In the second frame, the kids burst into the room, and the frame changes to bright colors, sunshine and warmth, and happy smiles. That cartoon stayed on her fridge for many years. I think it's a reminder to us all just how much she loved and enjoyed her family. Doris was not one to express her feelings outwardly, but in her loving smile, you could always feel it. Her gentle manner and loving smile stayed with her until the very end. We could see how much the caregivers at Amica Bronte loved Mama Doris, as they called her. She was really so good-natured and was really appreciative of them. Several of them told us she was their favorite. She was truly one of a kind. We'll miss you, Doris.
Most of my childhood was documented on 8mm film. Sometimes the memory is only from what I've watched on the screen. We couldn't see who was behind the camera as those 2 giant floodlights blinded us while someone was filming. I do remember taking figure skating lessons with Mom. My group of girls were pink carnations. Mom made little pink hats and skirts. She and the other mums dressed in blue skating skirts, also sewn by Mom. I do believe that Dad, Cheryl, and Michael were in the stands, perhaps having a little chuckle at us. Mom taught me how to play cribbage. When we cut the cards, if we both didn't like the card, we would just pick another one. Mom was quite an athlete, a skill that she was admired for as a young girl. A friend, Karen, had a short visit with Mom and I several years ago. She told her aunt that she had seen Doris. Her aunt shared a story. All the girls at school were in awe of Doris as a baseball player. She was a pitcher. She apparently was and continues to be a legend. Lori from across the street recalls coming for lunch some days as she and Joanne had forgotten their keys. There was always lunch for us when we came home from lunch for school. We held Bev's surprise 18th birthday party at the house. It was Mom's way of knowing my friends and making them feel welcome. Cheryl, Mom, and I witnessed history while watching the moon landing in 1969. So many historic events have occurred in the last 98 years that Mom has seen. Mom was always very frugal, teaching us to never pay full price. I can still see those cans of tomato soup in the house. They were on sale. Mom was always there to get us up and off to school, to drive us to lessons or the theater or the pool. Dinner was always on the table at 5 p.m. when Dad walked through the door from work. Mom baked and decorated both Cheryl and my wedding cakes. Not sure if Cheryl knew that her cake was tipping over in the afternoon, and Mom and I had to fix it the day of her wedding. Mom sewed all my bridesmaids' dresses and also many of my dresses as a young girl. She was so thrilled when she purchased her Bernina sewing machine with all those fancy stitches. Dad used to like to tell a story, that first home up in Red Lake. The boss was coming for dinner. Mom made her first pie. Even the dog, Rags, wouldn't eat it. She's certainly come a long way from there. One of the family favorites was her millionaire's pie. Dad had a few jobs that took him to the U.S. One summer, Mom packed the three of us kids into the old Ford and drove to Pittsburgh. She drove all day to get there. My memory is that we were there for the summer, and the neighbor kids next door didn't know how to answer Mom when she asked, "Do you want some eggs, eh?" They knew scrambled, sunny side up, and over easy, but not A. Mom has 9 grandchildren. She helped the first 3 weeks with every one of them. In my case, she had slept in the chair one night waiting for the baby to wake up. She changed him and handed him over to me to feed. She cooked and did the laundry, enveloping every one of those grandchildren with so much love right from birth. I must have been about 18 or 19. Mom decided she wanted to try camping. She drank beer with me and went swimming in the lake. I think 2 nights were enough, as she said, "Let's go to town and treat ourselves to a hotel." I think crawling in and out of the tent wasn't her idea of fun. Mom and Dad would come out west to visit Michael and his family and me and mine. We would all get together for barbecues. It was wonderful for our kids to spend time with their faraway grandparents. Mom was a constant in our lives growing up. She was always there when we got home from school. She traveled with me on a cruise to Alaska, and we would visit the Rocky Mountains when she would come to visit us. Over the past year, I have flown back 5 times to see Mom, each time thinking it would be my last. The last time was in February. She had few words to say, but her love was shown for me in her eyes and a squeeze of her hand. We will certainly miss her, but are joyful knowing that she has completed her journey to the spiritual world, arriving in time to bake Dad his birthday pie and to celebrate her rebirth with Brother Michael, who passed before her. Love you, Mom.